It's a beautiful Tuesday morning in the city of Lagos. Good morning and welcome to Today in the News on Vanguard Life. My name is Ololade Adeomi. Let's get started. Look into the Vanguard newspaper. It says PDP factions close ranks. Fem Anyang was national secretary. Top banner says kidnappings. Youth set Emir Palace. NDLEA office ablaze in Kwara. You can find both stories on page 5 and page 6 respectively. Away from the Vanguard straight into the Punch newspaper. Major headline on the Punch says Warring PDP blocks reunite for 2027 showdown. The top banner says APC NEC convenes July 24th to decide Ganduje's successor. Away from the Punch straight into the Guardian newspaper. The top story says how interest overlapping roles may undermine new tax regime. Obi denies pact with Atiku, backs rationale presidency. That's all we have on the front page of the newspaper this morning. Join us after the break for a quick analysis of some of our top stories. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, it's Today in the News on Vanguard Live. My name is Odolade Adeomi. Joining me in the studio today is Mr. Dayo Akintobi, publisher Lekki Today, Ikeja GRA Today, and Ilupeju Today. Good morning, Mr. Dayo
Good
Akintobi.
morning to you, Lolade. Good morning to all our viewers.
Okay, straight into our first story for today. On June 30th, 2025, yesterday, Edu local government of Kwara State, frustrated youth erupted in protest over a rise in kidnappings. They blocked roads, burned tires, stormed the Emir Palace, and also set ablaze the NDLEA office. This particular trigger was, as a result of the kidnapping of a well-known agrochemical dealer around that area. It was even alleged that the kidnappers overpowered the local vigilantes before they were able to kidnap that person. So, how effective can we say our security officials are? And do you think it's essential for our security officials to work alongside with the local security, the vigilantes, in order to, protect lives and properties?
Well, what we saw happen in Kwara State is what generally happens when people get fed up of government malaise, when they have a sense that government is not living up to its primary responsibility of protecting life and property. And I guess what we saw yesterday was frustration bubbling over by virtue of the fact that kidnappers, bandits seem to be running rampant all over the country, not just in Kwara State. And it's not just the youth in Kwara, it's a general sense that people are disgruntled, that government is not living up to its responsibility of protecting people. So um, many state governments have tried to address the gap, the lacuna between federal government, law enforcement, and local needs. And what they've done is they've tried to set up these vigilante type operations like Amotekun in the southwest, like Ibubeagu in the southeast. And the reasons those came into existence is to bridge the gap between what the federal government is unable to do. There's a school of thought that says that law enforcement should be as local as possible, that the best way to fight crime is if your crime fighters are from within your community because they are known, they are trusted, they can get intelligence, they can get information. People will come and talk to them because they're one of us, unlike others coming from Abuja. How effective can it be that somebody in Abuja is the one dictating the type of defense mechanisms that should be deployed in Lagos State? So that's why there's been a clamor for this whole restructuring and let's decentralize not just the police but electricity, railways, all kinds of utilities seem to be better positioned if they are decentralized. And so we've seen Amotekun actually very effective in collaborating with the police. They don't particularly have powers of prosecution, powers, but they they can arrest and hand over to the police. And it's been very effective when they work together in collaboration. So to now hear that in Kwara states that bandits and kidnappers are able to overpower the vigilantes, which is the last line of defense for the common man. That's the whole purpose of these paramilitary groups that are supported by the state government and local government, is to be a last line of defense after the police and the regular federal defense architecture have been not necessarily overwhelmed, but not able to cope. Then these people are supposed to be the last line of defense. Now they've been overwhelmed. So the youth in Kwara feel vulnerable. And that's why they expressed their frustration yesterday. I didn't quite understand why NDLEA office was raised, but I guess because it's a federal government structure. So they're probably just venting their anger on anything that looks like a government structure. Then they march to the Emir's palace to go and protest. And so they're just making their voices heard about where the shoe is pinching them.
Okay, so talking about the Emir Palace that was burnt, and we all know the Emir Palace is like a symbol of traditional leadership. It's very important for a cultural country. What can we say about the public trust in local leadership?
Well, there's been some speculation, some rumor that some of the traditional rulers are complicit in some of what's happening, especially with the farmer-herder clashes, some of the terrorism, that Boko Haram cannot be occupying villages and all that without some of the traditional rulers giving them land, giving them cover, and all kinds of things. So it seems that we're losing a bit of trust. First of all, the question is how relevant are the traditional authorities in terms of really wielding power? All they do nowadays really is just parcel out land and pocket the money and maybe resolve domestic disputes or local disputes. But in terms of real authority, ever since they became public servants and they are subservient to a government structure, they've lost most of their authority. But the stools are still revered, they're still looked up to, they're still honored. And by the time you see youth being that angry as to go and raise the Emir's palace, what it means is that they have lumped all authority figures together. They are no longer separating that one is a structured constitutional government, one is a local stool, one is a council, a local council, one is state. To them, everybody in authority is responsible. We don't separate authority figures. As far as we are concerned, if you are in a position of power, whatever the position of power is, you are not doing enough to keep us protected. And we will deal with all of you no matter what side of the aisle you are sitting on. That's what we saw yesterday. So is there an erosion of trust in the traditional institutions? Of course, without a doubt, there is.
Okay, so some of the protesters even went as far as saying they've been recurring issues of kidnappings like weekly. What immediate policy measures should the Kwara state government and the federal government implement, in order to assure the communities that these kidnappings are going to stop?
Even the federal government has not been able to implement any policies to stop kidnapping. So I don't know what the state government or any authority agency can do particularly. But it has been said that poverty is that kidnapping is being fueled by poverty. That a lot of the banditry, the kidnapping has an economic motive that is being done to alleviate poverty issues. That this is an easy way to make money for people. That it's less risky than the armed robbery they used to do in those days. It's more lucrative because you can demand ransom in the millions, as opposed to if you break into somebody's house, perhaps all you'll get is a Nokia phone and maybe a flat screen TV. How much are you going to make from all of that? But if you kidnap somebody and you organize it well, it might be worth millions. So there's an economic incentive to kidnapping. Banditry, terrorism, a lot of it is the underpinnings come from economic motives. But in some cases, there's also an ideological drive. I think in Boko Haram, initially, they started out protesting against Western education. They didn't want Northerners or Muslims of their own particular sect to be indoctrinated in Western traditions. And when you think about it, there are many things about the West that are creeping into our own civilization that are not palatable to us as Africans. Things like same-sex marriage, things like legalizing Indian hemp, things like LGBTQ movement. They are corrosive Western traditions that are seeping into our own culture that all of us should rightfully stand up against, right? But Boko Haram's thing was Western education. I think Western education has given us a lot of progress that we have made. I think a lot of our advancement as a people has been based on the fact that we did have Western education. But nonetheless, I think that government needs to address the issue of youth unemployment. I think a lot of youth are idle, and so they are willing tools, they're malleable tools in the hands of those who have ulterior motives. So the government needs, and remember, the population of youth in Nigeria now is exploding. I think those between 18 and 35 constitute more than 50% of the population. So if they're idle and they don't have anything doing, they're easy to recruit into these groups that have nefarious intent. So um, that's one of the things government needs to do immediately is to address the youth restiveness and youth unemployment and begin to um, channel their energies in positive directions, youth empowerment, like for example, the student loan program that the government has done that helps a lot of people who couldn't afford to go to school. There can be apprenticeship programs. University is not for everybody. I don't care the psychology of our parents who say, "Oh, I want you to be a doctor, I want you to be a lawyer, oh, you this, you that." University, there are people who never stepped in a university who are billionaires today. So university education is not for everybody. Some of us are skilled with our hands. So government needs to emphasize more on skills acquisition, technical training, those kind of things to keep the youth engaged. I think, and then maybe perhaps try and find out what is really behind this wave of terrorism and try and find out what the grievances of the drivers are. If it's economic, then let's take steps to increase the welfare, improve the welfare of the people. If it's ideological, let's find out what it is they don't like about the way we live. Some people say Nigeria is a geographic expression, that the three major tribes we were all lumped together forcefully by the British and that we're not naturally yoked together. So perhaps the thing is, let's all look at each other and say, these are the terms under which we want to live. And if we can't agree on the terms we want to live, let everybody go their way. That may be the ultimate solution. Perhaps what is fueling all this is the fact that we are unevenly yoked. We are not the same people. We don't have the same values. We don't think the same way. We don't want the same things. The Northerners, their ambitions are completely different from those from the Southwest. The Southeasterners, their ambitions are completely different from the Southwesterners. So maybe that's the solution is try and negotiate our togetherness. And if we can't find a common ground, maybe everybody should go their way.
Okay, so you spoke about poverty earlier, and there have been controversies as well on social media about the fact that it's looking like the agricultural and rural communities are often targeted as well. So, what better way can they be protected?
Hmm. Well, Nigeria is a vast, vast, vast land mass. And to think that you can deploy enough law enforcement to cover every nook and cranny is impossible. Can't be done. Even with technology, you can't. I mean, they have drones now, they have satellites that can see things, CCTV everywhere, but you still can't police the entire country. So there's got to be an open willingness to work together. I mean, there's no amount of technology and manpower that you deploy that will be adequate if there is no sense of harmony, good neighborliness, harmonious coexistence, brotherly love,
No.
neighborly love. So that's what's got to be nurtured. And that's why you would think that with a country that has this many churches and mosques, we should all love each other. But that's not the case, in spite of all the religious fervor in the country. And there's no religion in the world that doesn't preach love and being your brother's keeper. That's what religion is all about. And in spite of the proliferation of religion in Nigeria, we're not our brother's keeper. We are here victimizing each other. The slightest little opportunity, we take advantage of each other. So that's something that's got to change. Is we got to love each other more.
Okay, so the vigilantes in the community were overpowered after what is said to be like a long tussle between the youth and the vigilantes and the kidnappers. So, how can we say the security agencies can communicate transparently and even effectively? Because, according to some people on social media, that was a long time or enough time for the security officials to have come into play. How effectively it seems to a lot of people, it seems like there was a lack of communication between the people in the village and the security officials, because the tussle went on for a really long period of time. How effective can we say? What are the proper ways that communication between the youth or the communities can be fostered between the security officials and the communities as well?
Well, the advantage of the paramilitary groups, the vigilantes as we call them, is that they're usually drawn from within our midst, from
Yes,
among
yeah.
us. And so communication, it should be first line communication, first line. There should be, because those people come from our bedrooms, they come from our huts, they come from our neck of the woods. So there shouldn't be a communication gap. Where I see the communication gap is between the vigilante and the police. Because remember, they are a support system for the police, but they are not as well trained, they are not as well equipped, they are not as well remunerated. So they are a support system for the police. So where I would expect that when this thing happened or started happening, what should have happened was that there should have been a mayday or an SOS call put out to the police by the vigilante. There should be a communication set up between those two aspects of law enforcement, such that what the vigilante should have been doing was trying to hold those people at bay till the police or the army arrived. The vigilante should not, in and of themselves, be taking on these people and trying to go hand to hand, mano a mano battle with them one on one. They are not equipped to do that. Many of them are not even having the right to bear arms. Many of them is kondo, baton, baton. That's a kondo. It's baton that they carry. They don't have by law. I think constitutionally they're not empowered to carry arms. So how can they really effectively put down an insurrection that's coming from well-armed bandits and kidnappers who have made so much money they're able to buy the most sophisticated weapons that even the police run away from? So how will vigilantes really be able to keep them at bay, engage them in a full-fledged firefight, and prevail? It's not going to happen. The vigilantes need the backing of the police. They are just a frontline defense mechanism that's meant to just initially engage and hold these people while we're waiting for police and army to arrive. So that's the problem. The communication gap is not between the youth or the community and the vigilante, it's between the vigilante and the official law enforcement architecture.
Okay, so away from that, into our second story for today. Despite the federal government partnership spending roughly 1.5 trillion naira on electricity metering, even initiatives like NPPM, MPI, and even MEF, over 7 million out of 13.5 million registered consumers in Nigeria remain unmetered, relying on unfair estimated billing. What does this decade-long, delay in metering say about the government's capacity and the political will to implement reform in the power sector?
Interesting. Well, um, let's go back to when electricity was privatized in the previous administration, not the immediate past one. Part of where the problem began was when electricity was privatized. Most of the distribution companies were sold to cronies of the government in power. There were people who had no technical expertise. There were people who didn't have the deep pockets enough to be able to fund the electricity infrastructure. Now, metering is a very necessary part of the reform, because first of all, estimated billing has been found to be unfair. You don't necessarily pay for what you consume, because the way they calculate estimated billing is that if 10 residences are on one feeder pillar or one transformer or whatever the case may be, whatever the complete output of that transformer is for the month, they just take the total value and divide by the 10 and give to each of you to pay. But the house next door to you may have 20 air conditioners, 5 refrigerators, a pumping machine, a swimming pool, and you only have your fan. Exactly. And one bulb. So is it fair for you all to pay the same thing? But the electricity city companies don't care. As long as they get the money that came out of that feeder pillar, they don't care. Then there's also an idea that there may be a conspiracy, that they make more money from estimated billing than they do from metering, because it is said that if you are metered and you can see your consumption, you will be more scrupulous. You will switch off lights that you are not. When the room is empty, you switch off the lights Sometimes when you're going to work in the morning, you turn off your freezer. When you come back in the evening, turn it back on. You will manage your consumption better, so you spend less. So the discos make less. So I don't want to believe it's true, but especially on social media, that's the idea, is that they make a lot more money from estimated billing because a lot of times you are paying for more than you actually consume. And also, of course, if you can measure your consumption, you'll be more scrupulous about it, which will reduce what you use. So um, there are two programs for metering at the moment. There's a free program and there's a paid program. I think the free program is called IMAP or something like that. The free program is where everybody has signed up because the paid meters are not cheap. For a three-phase meter, I think it's 200,000 plus, almost 300,000 or more to get it. If you can pay that amount of money, you have your meter next week. But how many people in Nigeria can afford to pay that kind of money for a meter? And also remember, the meter is not yours. Even if you pay for it, it still belongs to the utility company. It's not yours. That 200,000 you've paid is just paying to have access to metered electricity. So majority of Nigerians have gone to queue up for the free one. And of course, the queues are long, the supply is limited. So it takes forever. If you're in that queue for free, it might take you 9 months to a year and a half to get your meter. But if you are ready to pay, you'll get it tomorrow. So that in and of itself is wrong. There should not even be a program that allows you to pay. We should all be given free and it should be quick. But they don't have an incentive to make the free one quick because they're saying, well, they have to pay the companies that make it. Like I told you in the beginning, they are financially constrained. They don't have money because all the money they paid to buy the discos, all the debts they incurred, they say they are not making it back from the electricity they are selling. So they are in financial dire straits right now. So they don't have money to pay the meter companies. So today they get a little bit of money, they order 1,000. You have how many million people in Nigeria that are waiting for meter? They order 1,000. How do you share 1,000 meters when you have a waiting list of 5 million people? How do you share it? Is it first come, first serve? Is it the Oga's friend that gets it? How do you do? So, of course, it's a recipe for chaos. And that's what we're seeing in that sector. What are the remedies? I don't know. Do we roll back that whole privatization thing and start from scratch? Because you can't build something on nothing. And I think that from the get-go, I don't know enough about the sector to discuss intelligently to the point of being able to tell you the technical and financial problems. But I do know that looking at it with a bird's eye view from a layman's perspective, somebody who is not an expert in the sector, it just looks to me like the setup is inefficient, it's incompetent, it's riddled with corruption, and at the end of the day, it's the common man who is bearing the brunt of it and paying the price. That's why it's supposed to intervene. What is the necessary intervention? I can't say. Is it cancel the licenses and start afresh? Who knows? All we know is that let government come to our aid because we are not having an easy time with electricity.
So, talking about corruption and lack of accountability, there have also been opinions on social media outside there of people saying, this failure can be attributed to corruption, attributed to a lack of accountability from the government. So, what should the government do to ensure there's transparency, there's accountability in this meter procurement and installation?
Well, there's this agency called NERC, National Electricity Regulatory Commission. It's really their remit they're the regulator.
Yeah.
It's their remit to keep all the agencies in line, whether it's the discos, whether it's transmission company, whether it's the generating. It's NERC's responsibility to make sure they are all toeing the line. One thing I think gives us a bit of hope and gives a bright light on the horizon is that recently there's been deregulation to where the states have now been empowered to set up their own electricity regulatory agency. I've always been an advocate of decentralization. I think we can be more effective. The more local you can make things, the more to the grassroots level you can make things, the easier it is to oversee. So I think by the federal government ceding its power to regulate electricity to the states, I think that gives us some hope because first of all, remember, with the states, the numbers are fewer. NERC is overseeing the entire country. That's looking at the needs, the power needs of 220 million people. So now the states, Lagos, for example, 20 million is much less. It's 10% of the whole country. So it's easier when the numbers are fewer. If Lagos itself can now decentralize it to the local governments, imagine my local government here in Mushi, where we have maybe 2 million people. Imagine they can now regulate electricity. They are now dealing with a much smaller mass than even Lagos State is dealing with than the federal. So the more decentralized it is, the easier it becomes to manage because at the total level is unwieldy. It's difficult to oversee. How many discos do we have across the whole country that NERC is trying to say, what are your number of meter applications? How many did you give this month? How many are outstanding? How many are paid? How many are getting free? And you have to follow up on each and every one of these applications. It becomes very, very unwieldy and complicated to do. So this deregulation and handing it off to the states, and my understanding is that I think about 10 or 12 states have already met the criteria to be able to do it, and I think another 5 to 6 are in the process of completing the requirements. So, in a few months, about half of the states in Nigeria will be quite able to regulate their own electricity affairs, and I believe that will pay off better for us, the individual consumers.
So, given the privatization of discos,
Yes.
is it appropriate for the government to continue to intervene, or should they just, leave the responsibility fully to the discos, to bear?
Electricity is a public utility. There are certain things that government can't afford to leave completely hands off, laissez faire, hands off to private buccaneers, as I would call entrepreneurs who are capitalistic oriented, their profit motive, they are driven by profit. So there's a tendency to cut costs, cut corners to increase profit. But because electricity is a necessity, by virtue of it being a public utility, is electricity, water, roads, police, you know, some aspects of transportation like rail and even ferry services. Those are essential services. The public utilities are essential services. But to make them more efficient, you can privatize some of them. Some of them are amenable to privatization, but there must still be government oversight because it is a public good, a public service. Some of them are amenable to privatization, but there must still be government oversight because it is a